Alright, another update. And also, actually, I'm going to do the Mesa libraries from start to finish. And with the version that's in Pkgsrc and how to work around the issue with the hard links. The only unfortunate part about it is you're going to need some kind of FTP. I went over this briefly, but I didn't get to the full solution. So basically, it works if you, in general, the major steps we're going to go over is we're going to get the hard links out of the tar file, because this version of Mesa libraries 7.11.2 had hard links in the zip file. So when it tries to unzip, it can't. It's the feature's not supported on the file system. And then once we get it back, pretty much if you apply the patches that are in the I did this manually, however, but if you apply the patches that were in the 7.8.2 patch set that you can find at the Haiku ports, and I wouldn't be able to do this without Haiku ports, it'll work. There's a few things that I had to do, and one that you probably wouldn't be able to do under vanilla situations. And that includes having to make some stopgap headers. I guess, it really wasn't that I have to, but I decided to do that. I could go ahead and edit this program and whatever other programs decide they want to find the two header files that that the libraries were looking for. I had to move. Now, these aren't stock headers that come with Haiku. It's just there are actually XCB headers that, and I've also just to note that there is one. The SHM header is now present on my system. Or at least I've seen it. So it's in the system subfolder. So it's a matter of me making stopgap headers, and I'll just go. They're pretty simple to do, and I'll show how to do that. Let's see, what else did I have to do that was not ordinarily. And then I had to delete two patches from Pkgsrc, so they wouldn't apply. Otherwise, they probably would have interfered with my Confederate patches that I had. And basically, what I mean by when I say Confederate patches, I mean the implication is that it's kind of like Confederate currency after the war. The Civil War. It isn't good anywhere else. It's kind of like for your own use. And so basically, what I just edited the files and set them aside, and then when I go ahead and do the run, I just go ahead and copy them back in. Not all that portable, but useful for my purposes. So that's the overview of what I'm going to do, and I've finished the run on the net programs. My package count is up to 3,458. I decided to go ahead and just do Mesa at this stage a little earlier than I first planned, but because I wanted to figure out what the numbers would be like without Mesa, but I already get a pretty good idea. Overall, if I didn't have Mesa in there, and plus I still have to do the GLU libraries or the GLUT libraries, whatever you want to call them, and so it still doesn't really move much forward. Just getting Mesa, so wouldn't really hurt the numbers. But most categories, the circumstances are anywhere from the lowest one was the file systems category, and multimedia was pitiful with 8%. Ham was about 8%, but for the most part, if I do a run through it, just with the things that I've built so far, and they're really maybe the most I've taken the time to port and succeed at, or whatever you want to call it, hack or port some of the packages to get them to work, and then as a result, some of the dependencies built as because of that. So and when I've looked at the analogy, just basically in general, there are just a lot of code that a good number of these issues are coming from code that has the code's trying to find some kind of definition, reference, declaration, something, and it can't find it, and so it fails. This is almost kind of like a comment on Posix compliance out there. And actually, if you want to call it compliance, it's more or less a guide, and to my view, not really a law. But had I not taken some steps with some of these things, and if I didn't have the math library and the library network and all the, everything else, overriding the fact that these things would have, or library network getting injected in there, because I'm getting more of a gain than a loss, and I'm losing some builds because of the way I have the base thing set up, but it's like a ratio of 5 or 6 to 1. I wish I had an estimate of how many of the 11,799 packages that I'm counting at this stage would have needed some kind of patch for, library network, math library, any of those other things. And although those, those aren't deviations from the Posix standard, but if you, get an idea that if you build just a pure Posix system in general, what you end up getting is a system that you probably, because I had to change some of the source. So the source that's out there as it applies to Posix, shall we say, you probably would, I'd have a lot less packages, I'll tell you that much, if I didn't make any effort at all to try to get anything to build. Because some of them were basic dependencies, including Python. If I made no effort with Perl, I would be out. I got a lot of Perl. The Perl builds are just huge, but let's see where I'm at right now. The only thing that went wrong with Perl was that it put the library in a place that was unusual. So let's start over again. So if I were to just make no effort at all, which is not, I'm not saying that has anything to do with Posix. If I were to make no effort, none at all, and just bootstrap package source and just do a run and do nothing, I would at least be out all these Perl builds. Oh my god. Goes from 1140. Finally out of Perl run to 2141. Wow. So there's 1,000 Perl packages that if I hadn't moved the Perl library up from the core subdirectory into the library directory, I would be down to 2,400 at this stage, with only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to go, and that's, I'd be just getting close to 20% of a build success rate with that. And then if I hadn't made any effort to change any of the code, I don't know, 15% or something like that. If I had done Python, let's see how many Python builds do I have. Those are easy to subtract out. So, and I also have 2 different versions of Python in here, and it's helping. So, some things build with Python, some 27, some build 34. We're going from 2254 down to not as many. Okay, well, won't count those. Almost 100. So, the numbers add up. And then, of course, text is, whether you can use all the text parts, if the main thing doesn't work, it's no good. You throw that in, then you got library network. And if I hadn't made an effort to get some of these things built, I don't know, it would have been pretty dismal, like 10%, just out of the box. 10% build success rate out of the box ain't too great. It's I'll tell you, it's not that way in the other platforms. And what I'm trying to do here is trying to do 2 things. One is trying to say, hey, can we do something about the way we've done things so we won't have a natural, say, dumb build rate of 10%, where other platforms probably have a dumb build rate of a lot more. I mean, just to be generous, I'll say 50%. It's probably more. As far as whether I have a good measure of what Posix does, well, it's not any better than this. It couldn't be. That is to say, if our operating system, assuming that Haiku is 100% Posix compliant, which I don't know if it is or not, but let's just assume it is, then the result of being 100% Posix compliant is that you have, and doing a dumb build, or maybe taking some steps. I mean, the Perl move wasn't that big a deal. I mean, so, and that really isn't a Posix issue. Wherever I've had to, I would say that out of all those, I mean, a lot of these patches are just for undefined references or something like that. So without any serious porting effort, so I'll give you the Perl library move. We're looking at, say, 20%. Whole 10% of the packages, or was it 1,000 Perl packages I had? Yeah, that's around 10%. So yeah, I would, that's probably the only real, just absolute, not much to it kind of change. And then with limited changes that I've been able to manage, and with library network, and with all these things, either taken out or put in to take and p threads. I would say those. I don't know. I mean, if I'm at 29%, I mean, at least a good 10% of these is going to require some kind of change for, if not more, for math library, for library network, those things. So between Posix kind of underperforming on the promise of being, if we're just Posix, everything will build, and the differences in our system, it becomes a very, very hard task. And so, and there's a lot of packages. I mean, some of them are just going to build because the other thing is built. For the most part, Perl. The Perl modules are built because Perl is built. So if you build one, you'd add about 1,000 more to your tally at least. And I still got a good maybe close to 4,000 more to try. So I'm only about 2/3 way through this process, or maybe more. So maybe at the end of the day, we'll get about 2,000 Perl builds, right? And but what really matters are the ones that are just, if you don't have it, you could just scratch a whole list of apps that people actually want to use off the list. The Perl modules, they're utilities that run in the background, help other applications run. I have a lot of things that help other applications run, but I don't really have anything that it's like, wow, I've got this at this stage. And of course, this is a lot of auto building, but if I went in and I looked at these ones where the analysis takes place, I could probably, I got up the archivers up to 62 where it started out at, I don't remember the number, it could have been 40, it could have been 50%. By looking at the analysis and taking action based on what I saw some of the packages were failing because of. But I got 39 categories, and that was one of the smaller categories. Okay. I'm not saying it's impossible to build these things, but let's see, I've been at this for, it's mid-September now. And I think I started beginning of July. This platform, I started over again in August, but I just went and rebuilt everything I knew was going to build. Beginning of August. So it's been like a marathon of constant package building for about a month and a half. With some hiccups, of course. But so it gets to the point where, and then okay, so for each, let's just go over Mesa, because I guess I'm sure I'll get lost. There's a lot of details here. But the point to remember in all this is that some packages, they'll just compile. Like I said, you'll have, to start, there's going to be the amount that I finished, 1,000 or 1,500 packages are just going to magically appear if you do nothing. If you just basically move the Perl library into the library directory from where it's buried in the core directory, you'll get another 1,000. And with a few hacks here and there, you can probably get it up to, without dealing with Python at this stage, with a little over 3,000. And a lot of the X11 apps want Python. Python helps build a lot of these things, so it could be 2,500 just with Perl and a dumb build. So, and that may be generous. And most of them are just not much to really be all that interested in. And then, then for the more difficult ones like Python, you can spend a long time getting that to work. So for every time a new Python is going to come out, someone's going to have to, one or two or three people are going to have to try. And this other person's going to try pick up where the other person's left off and add some more and add some more. So then eventually you get it into the ports, but if it's not really up to date, people aren't really that interested in it. And then if it still doesn't lead to anything at the end of the day that you want to use, it's just empty. So I guess okay. So getting Mesa built is part of the gateway, but it always, why does it seem like it's got to be extra difficult just to this is one small step, and a few other steps I'm going to have to take to start getting apps that are X11 based. Yeah, I know Mesa will build in Haiku Porter, but it's not the only thing. That one should be interested in. Basically, we're just kind of stuck, and then at the end of the day, we don't have an X11 environment. I mean, it can be done, but that's the issue. It's like, oh, it could be done, but well, you can do it, but you could make a recipe, but yeah, you could eventually apply the patches, but yeah, you could eventually hack thousands of files for just to remove the -lm, but when it all adds up, it's just like, oh well. I'm glad I have something else I can use, and it's a shame because it does look like a promising environment, which is why I put this much time into it. And the reason why I mention all these things is because I hope maybe if I say the right thing, and it happens to to be on target, to make a change so things will be easier, why not say something? At least there's a chance something can be done with it. But then there's also always that, I just can't help noticing just the really the very strong feeling of, I don't know what to call it. The developers seem to be very confident as to the decisions they've made, and so it's like I'm just talking to the wall. But there's a lot of packages out there, and it's not just a few. We're not all of us are ready to go off and join the monastery and don the monk cloak and dedicate our lives to porting apps to Haiku. If we had a reasonable team effort and a larger community, if I had to spend one weekend every couple months on Haiku, on the Mesa library, say, or whatever, right? And I knew that if I did that, I knew someone else was going to do, and I knew it was all going to come together at the end of the day, at January or whatever, when the release came or whatever, that stuff would work. I'd feel it'd be worth it. But when it's just like a mess. It's too hard to integrate things. Anyway, I'm just going on too much on this. I'm way too tired for it. So for the Mesa libraries, the first thing you have to get the hard links out of the tar source file, and this is just one example. Just to rant some more, I guess. I am aware that the B shipped the B file system without the hard links in them. But why we haven't felt that was important to do is beyond me. Because when people try to do... Okay, so yeah. So to work around that, basically in Haiku ports, I guess someone had to... Every time... Well, I don't know. The newer builds of Mesa, I don't know if they have the hard links buried in the tar files, but there were other packages that are just like that. So every time... Whatever. It just gotten to the point where... It seems that Haiku ports will use Git to get the source code down and unzip it elsewhere, and then just deliver it as source. So it's like, just do the code and put the hard links in there instead of 1, 2, 3. I'm going to have an example of how I had to work around it. There's another example of someone else has to work around it. There are other packages that have the hard links in them. There are some builds when just inside the build script, it tries to hard link. And the numbers are just too fucking big for anybody really to... I've been going to this almost constantly. I mean, if I... There's no way, that under normal circumstances, anybody would be able to keep up this kind of pace and time commitment to building packages. I'll just say that. Alright, so I don't think I'm just going to not do this at all, but... Alright, so what happens with packages, just go in here again. I know I did this yesterday, but I'm just going to do it again. Also, before you even get a chance to build Mesa, you have to have a bunch of other stuff built. You won't even, it'll just say, oh, sorry, you don't have this other stuff. Such as Library X11, render proto, just a whole laundry list of X11 apps, unless you have a very strong build of a lot of X11 apps built already. Don't even bother trying to do this. You have to be at that stage. Okay, so assuming that Pkgsrc will say, hey, you're good, you got all the dependencies, go ahead, let's try to build. What it will do is it will download 2 different target files and place it in the dist files directory, in the Pkgsrc directory. This thing gets annoyingly slow when the trash is emptying. I've never had something take so long to empty it. Okay, so there happens to be Mesa right there. It puts it in a directory, and there are 2 different tar files. Okay. Between the 2 of them, at least one of them has hard links embedded in them. And so when you try to unzip them, at least in the state that they are when they arrive from the Mesa project, it'll say that the operation's not supported, and the build will stop. You'll look in the work directory and you'll see some files there, but there's stuff missing. The build just stops. If you knew where the hard links are supposed to be, you could manually go in there and copy everything and put them all in place and all that stuff. But I'm not quite sure it's worth the effort. what I've done is I FTP'd up the source files, the tarbzip2 files. FTP them down into Linux, and because I know, at least in my Linux system, I'm using a file system that can handle hard links. And then what you do at that stage, you're supposed to separate. You want to keep these two zip files separate. Sorry, I put it that way. But the problem is that the inner structure of both these zip files, at least the file structure, looks the same, so you can't unzip them in the same directory. So what I say you should do is create 3 different new folders in Linux and put Mesa Glutton #1 and Mesa Lib #2 and have the other ones sitting around, so later on when you build the zip files, they won't I don't know. You just want to move those out into #3 after you've unzipped your stuff. So you download it. You can email them to yourself, but the problem is with emailing them back, if you check your email with Web Positive, I've had a few times where I've tried to download source code and the system went into a kernel panic. You can get out of a kernel panic by typing exit, but so you might be able to email it back to yourself, or you can use the mail client. It doesn't have to be webmail, I guess. There are ways to get stuff back in here, but it's limited. It's FTP and email, basically, so far as I know, unless you've built something I don't know about. Okay, so once you're in Linux, you just unzip the files. So I've got this here, so let's just do this, I guess. These are the originals? Yeah, these are the originals. I'm going to create folder #1, I'll put the Mesa Glut in it. Create folder #2, and I'll put the Mesa Lib in there. And I'll create folder #3 to hold those things. This, by the way, is KD3. You can install KD3 without much effort at all in SUSE Linux. Okay, so what do we have? 2 of them. I'm going to put the Mesa Lib in #2. All right, okay, so I'm in #1. I'm just going to go ahead and extract it. All right, so now I'm going to move this tar file to #3. #2, do the same thing. This one takes longer because this one's a whole whopping, but you can see that the folder still says Mesa on it. So if you were to unzip both of those in the same directory, they all would land within the same folder. Then when you went to make your tarbzip file, it would only make 1 and not 2. So that's not part of the plan. You want to have both of these. You want to be back in the system so Pkgsrc really thinks that it's using the nice file it's downloaded for you. Now you have to turn off the make checksums in mk.conf in Pkgsrc to be able to do this, because the checksum will change, obviously, because there are now, instead of just 1 file for the things that are hard linked, there are now 2 files after this is done, but I haven't finished yet. All right, so here's #1. And I'm going to go into the terminal, and I'm going to do this change directory. Go into the original. Okay, so it shows us what this is. Yeah, right. So I'm going to go into #1, which, if I remember right, was the Mesa Glut. Let's make sure. It was the Mesa Glut, which is smaller. Alright, so this is not much of a big of a deal, but finding how to use this in the answer took a little while. So basically what I have to do is type tar first, and then 2 slashes, hard 1/d_reference. Then the name of the file you want to create, and this will be the same name that was before you unzipped it. And then you gotta tell it, it's kind of strange, but that's the name of the file I'm gonna create, and then now I'm gonna, this is my target of what I'm gonna zip up. So in the video I did yesterday, I screwed that up. It actually should have been Mesa-7.11.2. Alright, so then I just press Enter. Let me make sure I got that right. Is it hard? Oh, I forgot the option. -CVJF. Okay. Sorry. So the -CVJF goes after the hard dereference. If you put the hard dereference after the -CVJF, it'll try to create a file called hard dereference, which is very annoying. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so there we go. So there's my new zip file that I want to load up. Let's close 3 so we don't get confused. Okay, let's go back to 2 now. I'm pretty much going to have use up arrow to do that, but it's going to be, instead of Mesa glut, it's going to be Mesa lib. Okay, it's going to take longer, obviously, because it's a much bigger repository. All right, so now we have our 2 files. So now you're going to email those back to yourself, or you're going to FTP those back to yourself. You're going to place those back inside the dist files directory. And of course, if you still have the originals there, you just want to get rid of the originals and actually put these in there. Because now when you go to run, when you do to make install from the Mesa library subdirectory and under graphics, it'll actually unzip without displaying the error, but you have other issues to deal with. Okay, so that's just the first part of this whole thing. So you've just spent probably more time than it would take to code hard links in the file system, and you're just one person, but hey. All right. Now you have to patch up Mesa. And Mesa 7.11.2, the patch set from Haiku ports. And by the way, in Haiku, this very important graphics library is under, that's used for development, is found under syslibs. Under Haiku ports. Syslib. No, it's not. Go back. Science. Oh, okay. There's Mesa. It's under Mesa. The patch you're looking for as an example, you know, I guess I gotta figure out how to upload my Confederate patches. People just use that, but the one I used as an example was the 7.8.2 patch. So I just kind of open up. So how do you read this stuff? Well, looks like a mess, but basically up here, this is the command that was ran to get the list of the differences between the 2 files, which results in the changes. So basically, all you're really doing is you're looking for a file called mklib. You're looking for somewhere around 260 for this -wl, comma, star brackets, and you want to add the -L and the -L. That stuff that's going to be highlighted in red in a second. You can go down to 307. Now, a lot of the changes that are actually in this patch set are now in, as far as I can tell, the Mesa source, or these are actually, a lot of these were actually patches from Pkgsrc that someone used. And I think that's actually the case, because here, this next part on line 307, adding NetBSD as a description, I really doubt it's going to help us get our Mesa to compile in Haiku, but nonetheless, or the Sidewind stuff down here. But nonetheless, those patches seem to have made it into the source, or when you bmake extract, the patches just go in anyway. And so, but I'm not looking at anything that has been through the Pkgsrc mill. These are actual Haiku ports patches. So what I'm saying is these patches probably came from, a lot of these patches, especially for the other platforms that won't even affect our build, probably did come from Pkgsrc. I'm not going to waste time looking into it. So there's the MK library change. Basically, it looks like there's a lot of stuff here, but this whole bracket here, there's only 2 lines to remove and 1 line to add. It's not really anything. You just remove a word, the link name to thing, you know. If you remove BOS, I don't think it's going to add this Sidewind stuff. It's not going to do a damn thing for us. Nonetheless, then you have to make a config file called Haiku. And it's not like a regular configure file. It's just for Mesa. And there's already one called BOS. You can just copy that and then revise it and pretty much patch that or make changes to it based on the differences of what Mr. Alexander von Gluck IV has done. There's a few other, there's the gl.h header. And the reason why you're going to delete the gl.h, there's some patches to delete that I'll get to in Pkgsrc. If you don't delete those, you'll have problems. Changes to the make file, you just have to add the definition for Haiku. All these, there's only one that does not exist anymore. All the other, you can make the identical changes. Not the same line numbers, but the same lines exist. And in some cases, you can see the changes already been made. Or, if not, they're relatively straightforward to make. You just want to make sure you don't miss out on a bracket or a quote. And one thing I find annoying is when the caps lock is on, you can't do the shift. That annoys the hell out of me because I'll put the caps lock on to do some of the changes. This first one here, like where it's got $library name in quotes, right? So I'll just put the caps lock on, do library name, then I'll hit the shift, and then the right bracket. And I'm not a very good typist, so I'm not always looking at the screen. And then I'll move on to the next line, and I'll soon realize that the right bracket never displayed itself because shift is disabled if caps lock is on. But nonetheless, eventually I got it right. Got all the changes in. For the most part, it builds, but there still is one other issue, at least with Mesa 7.11, so let me go look at that. So basically all the answers are in the Mesa 7.8.2 patch set, but you can't just apply the patch because the line numbers are different. You have to find the line numbers, just make the changes. It only takes about half an hour. But those half an hours do add up and you're trying to build a whole lot of things. which is the overall lesson. But anyway, last change. So let's see. Here's my solve directory. Oh, right. Well, let's get back to this. If I can find it, eventually I will. Yes. There's a file called query matrix that has an error in there that so far no patch has been made for it. And what I remember doing with this is just getting rid of the lines that had errors associated with it. The whole if-then section, gone. Close it up, compile, we're good. Basically, that's all I did. Then you have your source. Okay, gotta back up. Okay, so you've got your source into the dist files directory now that you've brought it back in from Linux. But what you want to do is a bmake extract. You don't want to do a bmake install yet because you have to make changes to the source code, or if you have those files set aside in the form of Confederate patches, you just want to copy them in, but you don't want the build to start yet. You want the build to start after you've made your changes. So you bring those in, and according to the changes that you've made, Pkgsrc already has patches for, and that happens to be for what two files are there? There's a patch called patch/include/GL /lowercase gl/h, and there's another patch called patch bin make library. You have to delete those. If you don't delete those, the patches won't apply and the build won't go. It'll just go, oh, sorry, these patches didn't apply. Yeah. So just delete those two patches and you're fine at that point. Then you have to make the change to this query matrix also. That's not in any of the changes that were in that 7.8 patch set. You know, 7.8 to 7.11, that's a pretty good transition there. Then the last thing you have to do is you either got to figure out how you're going to patch your files, or you just do what I did if you can. But of course, I have headers that are writable. So, you know, and I've changed my specs to point to boot home package include. And what I ended up doing is there was an error. It says this header is trying to find these two other headers, and they're not there. So sorry, you can't continue the build. And I recognized those headers. They definitely were real. You know, I knew that I had built them. This is xcb.h and this xproto.h. And xproto I did very early. I've since rebuilt it, but and xcb I did really early. No, I did that later. Probably about a week ago now. But the program was looking for those headers. Of course, I have an include directory, so it's not as confusing. They were looking for them in the sys directory. So basically in Haiku, the build will fail if you were going to do a vanilla build without package source, without the specs changed, without anything brought in. The build will fail if it can't find the xcb or xproto headers in a sys subdirectory in the headers directory, or a Posix subdirectory called sys, or a BSD subdirectory called sys, or one of the other two, or one of the B subdirectories. I don't think now that I remember looking at it, when I did the when I typed env in the shell, so I just do it. I don't think that it's actually picking up. We'll find out. Does it have boot home non-packaged path? Not really. And then Posix thread model. I don't think it does that. I don't think it's path. Those wouldn't be paths. So you'd have to figure out how to maybe copy the headers down into your source and find out every single file that's pointing to those headers and put quotes around them, or make your own include directory. I don't know. Or put the I flag in there, -I, or override the specs. That's a way to do it. I have that in other videos. Otherwise, it won't build. So it's got to be able to read the contents of those. So what I did is I didn't make a copy. I actually did what they do. I just said, go ahead and include the XCB header from the XCB folder, and I'm aware that my overridden specs have boot home package include as the root of where the headers go. So when I have it tagged that way with XCBH, I'm saying look in the XCB subdirectory, the XCBH header, open please, with all the content, right? So that's how you easily deal with programs that are looking for headers in a different place than where you've put them. Maybe it was common to put certain headers in certain places in the past, and so I call these stopgap headers. But if you don't have write access to boot home system developed headers, you're shit out of luck unless you actually do a -I or whatever recommended over there, to point to those headers, a different set of headers, every time you compile, or every time you get an error like this. So it gets tedious. So there were, how many files to change? Exact quotes, exact spacings, exact wording, exact dollar signs. How many files to change? So you go 1, 2. Someone has to take time to do this in the first place. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Someone has to take the time to do that in the first place. Someone has to attempt to build, see it fail, decide they need to make a patch, look at the code, decide what code to add to it, make the change. Oh yeah, then they have to make a patch. Then they have to try the compile again, make there's an error, make a change, move forward, and keep going. That's how it works. Well, if you have 33% of 20%, to be generous, of your 11,800 files that need, oh, yeah, some kind of change at least. And some aren't as complicated as this, but a lot of them are. At least one or two files changed. You can see how much work it takes, and it's not just one person doing this. There's going to be more than one person doing this, and even if patches are made and put up somewhere, which is more work for the person doing a lot of work in the first place, and implemented correctly, it still takes time to set up the infrastructure to actually deliver that stuff. So you're doing all these things to deal with one issue. Some undefined reference that isn't building here versus some other platform. And what I'm saying is, let's fix the real problem that we're having, is that we're not passing on the references to the programs we want to use. The programs aren't jonesing to be used in our operating system. The end users of the operating system want to use programs in it. It works the other way around. So I guess that's my whole thing there. So that's Mesa, basically. In a nutshell, when I get to glut, I'll do that. There's something going on with Pkgsrc, the way it wants to unzip the glut package. Or in fact, didn't the download include that? I don't know why they separated it out. I would have liked to have had everything just build together, because it doesn't really. Anyway, so that's the deal. So everything I'm kind of doing here, at one time or the other, I actually need to use. Every once in a while, I have to override the specs. Every once in a while, I have to turn it off. Every once in a while, I have to, for the sake of my own time budget. Now, every once in a while, I keep the network library injection on, and I keep the math library removal on at all times, just for the sake of time and sanity. You know, it's insane to think that a small group of end users that love the way this operating system has turned out is going to go in and do that much editing. And the perspective is kind of like through the looking glass. It's got to be the other way around, or it's just going to stay this way. People tend to go, in general, they just tend to go with the path of least resistance. So they'll try out the look, they'll see it looks nice, but they'll say, no apps, and then I'll wait. And then we just don't get the saturation of enough people, and then, and then to make, and then, with this kind of difficulty having headers in the first place in the system, it kind of forces you, if you want to build anything, you have to use Haiku Porter. But if you want to use Haiku Porter, you got to make a recipe, and you have to have and get a patch. It's like, if there are too many obstacles, they'll just go elsewhere. And so that's basically what I found. And part of another major obstacle is just something it could be something else, but I think it's the headers. It's the only thing I can think of. But I mean, it's really literally like at least 1 in 4 build attempts just won't build, because either the header's not there, or if there is a header that exists, it's not in the place that the program is looking for, or if it finds the header, there's the Sunlin, there's the UNT8, the UNT64, 32, there's the just miscellaneous, just undefined references all over the place, just enough to really cut down the successful build rate. And you get a feeling that an operating system works well, you want to be able to go in there and see that in general things work without a lot of hassle. That means it works well. Also, during this whole thing, I think I read something somewhere. It says that Haiku uses Posix threads, and I don't know if that's causing some of just the slowness here. I don't know if it's the database nature of the file system, but I've never had it take this long to delete files. I mean, ever. You might as well just come back in an hour or two if you wanted to delete 30,000 files, and it's common in Pkgsrc. And just things tend to break after a while, so I'll be listening to some music, and then about a half an hour later, and then the media server doesn't really work that anymore, especially under a heavier load, or it doesn't look like it's, and then just the compiles just go at a slower pace. I just don't understand what's going on. But it could be that we decided to use Posix threads, and we have this thing, we really like Posix, but I'm not so sure it's so great. I mean, Posix, compromises really aren't, it's got to be, Posix has to be a compromised set of standards. If you think about it, and it's not really going to, you put it all together, it's not really going to make, if they're using the weakest form of threads for the worst Unix out there, this kind of threads will work everywhere, even in this crappy old Unix from 20 years ago, If you follow this standard, it doesn't mean it's the best thing to do, and that's what we should do. Posix is good to strive for until it hurts you, and then move away from it. And also with Posix, my opinion is that we're trying to port apps over to us, so it's not going to hurt. We're not making apps other people want to use. In the Posix world, in our C++ BOS API world, yeah, there are probably some apps people want to use and port over to there. But I don't think we're really worried about Posix in that area. The area we're worried about Posix is where the area, when it's opposite. Posix is kind of important. Well, it is important when you're making an app you think someone's going to use on another platform. But if it's the other way around, trying to get apps working in our platform, we shouldn't balk at changing our Posix interface. Oh no, that's not Posix, so let's not do that. So people have to keep patching things. It's backwards. Anyway, that's my whole thing. That's Mesa. That's my, and I'm ready to go to sleep. So I'm done. Oh, and I got a new wallpaper. Since the logo isn't here. So play the theme song for my presentations here.
Share and enjoy, journey through life with a plastic boy. Walk down by your side, let your pal be your guide. And when it breaks down or starts to annoy, or cries when it moves and gives you no joy, cause it seems that you have morning sex with your cat. Let tile on your wall or ripped off your door, and you get to the point you can't stand anymore. Bring it to us, we won't give a thing. We'll tell you. Stick your head in a pig.
Oh, I'm gonna shut down. Just gonna stop this damn camera before it explodes.